Happy Halloween. Happy Ia Samhain. Welcome to a little Halloween Samhain story time with our friend WB Yeats, Nobel laureate, Golden Dawn magician. And I have this beautiful copy of 1913 Rosa Alchemica, The Secret Rose, and the Tales of Red Hanrahan. And I'm going to read you a couple of those tales tonight as a special Halloween treat. So I hope you stick around and enjoy some stories that are rather old. And WB Yeats did something very interesting in the west of Ireland in his life. Is he traveled around and gathered the stories from the old and local people of the villages, but he didn't just gather the stories. He gathered also their expressions and their dialects and the way they spoke. And the opening dedication to the Tales of Red Hanrahan here is to Lady Gregory, who was his patron, and she was, of course, a lady, but an Irish lady, and had lands in Western Ireland, where Yeats later had his tower, his wizard's tower, that I've been to, and it's awesome. You can go there. And it says, "I owe thanks to Lady Gregory." Now, of course, if you are familiar with W.B. Yeats's voice, and you can hear him on YouTube and a few poetry recordings that exist, you'd know his voice is very, very distinct. It would be more like, "I owe thanks to Lady Gregory, who helped me to rewrite the stories of Red Hanrahan in the beautiful country speech of Kiltartan, and nearer to the tradition of the people among whom he, or some likeness of him, drifted and is remembered." That's a fair estimation, I think you'll agree, of how W.B. Yeats kind of spoke, at least when he was recorded. It would have been a strange thing for him to be alive at the dawn of recording. Imagine if those characters like Yeats and Crowley could have a YouTube. What a world. So I hope you've joined me for a spell to enjoy a couple fairy stories. And this first one about Red Hanrahan opens on Samhain Eve, which is very appropriate. It's Samhain, it's Eve of Samhain in Ireland right now with the time change. I'm here in Vancouver, Canada. And the story is as part of a series of stories of Red Hanrahan. And we definitely have time at least to do two. If you want to encourage me to do more, you know how to do that. But I hope you, get a cup of tea or something similar and are ready for a fun ride. Buckle up. Red Hanrahan. Hanrahan, the hedge schoolmaster, a tall, strong, red-haired young man, came into the barn, where some of the men of the village were sitting on Samhain Eve. It had been a dwelling house, and when the man that owned it had built a better one, he had put the two rooms together and kept it for a place to store one thing or another. There was a fire on the old hearth, and there were dip candles stuck in bottles, and there was a black quart bottle upon some boards that had been put across two barrels to make a table. Most of the men were sitting beside the fire, and one of them was singing a long, wandering song about a Munster man and a Connacht man that were quarreling about their two provinces. Hanrahan went to the man of the house and said, "I got your message." But when he said that, he stopped, for an old mountainy man that had a shirt and trousers of unbleached flannel, and that was sitting by himself near the door, was looking at him and moving an old pack of cards about in his hands, muttering, "Don't mind him," said the man of the house. "He is only some stranger came in a while ago, and we bade him welcome, it being Samhain night. But I think he is not in his right wits. Listen to him now, and you will hear what he is saying." They listened then, and they could hear the old man muttering to himself as he turned the cards: "Spades, diamonds, courage and power, clubs and hearts, knowledge and pleasure. That is the kind of talk he has been going on with the last hour," said the man of the house. And Hanrahan turned his eyes from the old man as if he did not like to be looking upon him. "I got your message," Hanrahan then said. He is in the barn with his 3 first cousins from Kilchrist, the messenger said, and there are some of the neighbors with them. It is my cousin over there is wanting to see you, said the man of the house, and he called over a young frieze-coated man who was listening to the song and said, "This is Red Hanrahan you have the message for." "It is a kind of message indeed," said the young man, "for it comes from your sweetheart, Mary Lavelle." "How would you get a message from her, and what do you know of her?" "I don't know her indeed, but I was in Lochray yesterday, and a neighbor of hers that had some dealings with me was saying that she bade him send you word, if he met away one from his side in the market, that her mother has died from her, and if you have a mind yet to join with herself, she is willing to keep her word to you." "I will go to her indeed," said Hanrahan, "and she bade you make no delay, for if she has not a man in the house before the month is out, it is likely the little bit of land will be given to another." When Hanrahan heard that, he rose up from the bench he had sat down on. "I will make no delay indeed," he said. These old cut pages are so uneven. It's very hard to turn them. "I will make no delay indeed," he said. "There is a full moon, and if I get as far as Gilchrist tonight, I will reach to her before the setting of the sun tomorrow." When the others heard that, they began to laugh at him for being in such haste to go to his sweetheart. And one asked him if he would leave his school in the old lime kiln, where he was giving the children such good learning. But he said the children would be glad enough in the morning to find the place empty, and no one to keep them at their task. And as for his school, he could set it up again in any place, having as he had his little inkpot hanging from his neck by a chain, and his big Virgil and his primer in the skirt of his coat. Some of them asked him to drink a glass before he went, and a young man caught hold of his coat and said he must not leave them without singing the song he had made in praise of Venus and of Mary Lavelle. He drank a glass of whiskey, but he said he would not stop, but would set out on his journey. "There's time enough, Red Hanrahan," said the man of the house. "It will be time enough for you to give up sport when you are after your marriage, and it might be a long time before we will see you again." "I will not stop," said Hanrahan. "My mind would be on the roads all the time, bringing me to the woman that sent for me, and she lonesome and watching till I come." Some of the others came about him, pressing him that he had been such a pleasant comrade, so full of songs and every kind of trick and fun, not to leave them till the night would be over. But he refused them all and shook them off and went to the door. But as he put his foot over the threshold, the strange old man stood up and put his hand, that was thin and withered, like a bird's claw, on Hanrahan's hand, and said, "It is not Hanrahan, the learned man and the great song-maker, that should go out from a gathering like this on Samhain night. And stop here now," he said, "and play a hand with me. And here is an old pack of cards, has done its work many a night before this, and old as it is, there has been much of the riches of the world lost and won over it." One of the young men said, "It isn't much of the riches of the world has stopped with yourself, old man." And he looked at the old man's bare feet, and they all laughed. But Hanrahan did not laugh, but he sat down very quietly without a word. Then one of them said, "So you will stop with us after all, Hanrahan?" And the old man said, "He will stop indeed. Did you not hear me asking him?" They all looked at the old man then, as if wondering where he came from. "It is far I am come," he said. "Through France I have come, and through Spain, and by Lou Grain, and of the hidden mouth, and none has refused me anything." And then he was silent, and nobody liked to question him, and they began to play. There were 6 men at the boards playing, and the others were looking on behind. They played 2 or 3 games for nothing, and then the old man took a 4-penny bit, worn very thin and smooth, out from his pocket, and he called to the rest and put something on the game. Then they all put down something on the boards, and little as it was, it looked much from the way it was shoved from one to the other, first one man winning, and then his neighbor. And sometimes the luck would go against a man, and he would have nothing left. And then one or another would lend him something, and he would pay it again out of his winnings, for neither good nor bad luck stopped long with anyone. And once Hanrahan said, as a man would is say in a dream, "It is time for me to be going on the road." But just then a good card came to him, and he played it out, and all the money began to come to him. And once he thought of Mary Lavelle, and he sighed, and that time his luck went from him, and he forgot her again. But at last the luck went to the old man, and it stayed with him, and all they had flowed into him, and he began to laugh little laughs to himself, and to sing over and over to himself, "Spades and diamonds, courage and power," and so on, as if it were a verse or a song. And after a while, anyone looking at the men and seeing the way their bodies were rocking to and fro, and the way they kept their eyes on the old man's hands, would think they had drink taken, or that the whole store they had in the world was put on the cards. But that was not so, for the quart bottle had not been disturbed since the game began, and was nearly full yet, and all that was on the game was a few sixpenny bits and shillings, maybe a handful of coppers. "You are good men to win and good men to lose," said the old man. "You have play in your hearts." And he began then to shuffle the cards and to mix them very quick and fast, till at last they could not see them to be cards at all, but you would think him to be making rings of fire in the air, as little lads would make them with whirling a lighted stick. And after that it seemed to them that all the room was dark, and they could see nothing but his hands and the cards. And all in a minute a hare made a leap out from between his hands, and whether it was one of the cards that took that shape, or whether it was made out of nothing in the palms of his hands, nobody knew. But there it was, running on the floor of the barn as quick as any hare that ever lived. Some looked at the hare, but more kept their eyes on the old man. And while they were looking at him, a hound made a leap out from between his hands, the same way as the hare did, and after that another hound and another, till there was a whole pack of them following the hare round and round the barn. The players were all standing up now, with their backs to the boards, shrinking from the hounds, and nearly deafened with the noise of their yelping. But as quick as the hounds were, they could not overtake the hare, but it went round, till at the last it seemed as if a blast of wind opened the barn door, and the hare doubled and made a leap over the boards where the men had been playing, and went out of the door and away through the night, and the hounds over the boards and through the door after it. Then the old man called out, "Follow the hounds! Follow the hounds, and it is a great hunt you will see tonight." And he went out after them. But used as the men were to go hunting after hares, and ready as they were for any sport, they were in dread to go out into the night. And it was only Hanrahan that rose up and said, I will follow on. "You had best stop here, Hanrahan," the young man that was nearest him said, "for you might be going into some great danger." But Hanrahan said, "I will see fair play. I will see fair play." And he went stumbling out of the door like a man in a dream, and the door shut after him as he went. He thought he saw the old man in front of him, but it was only his own shadow that the full moon cast on the road before him. But he could hear the hounds crying after the hare over the wide green fields of Grana, and he followed them very fast, for there was nothing to stop him. And after a while he came to smaller fields that had little walls of loose stones around them, and he threw the stones down as he crossed them, and it did not wait to put them up again. And he passed by the place where the river goes under the ground at Ballylee, and he could hear the hounds going before him up towards the head of the river. Soon he found it harder to run, for it was uphill he was going, and clouds came over the moon, and it was hard for him to see his way. And once he left the path to take a shortcut, but his foot slipped into a bog hole, and he had to come back to it. And how long he was going he did not know, or what way he went, but at last he was up on the bare mountain, with nothing but the rough heather about him, and he could neither hear the hounds nor any other thing. But their cry began to come to him again, at first far off and then very near. And when it came quite close to him, it went up all of a sudden into the air, and there was the sound of hunting over his head. Then it went away northward till he could hear nothing at all. "That's not fair," he said, "that's not fair." And he could walk no longer, but sat down on the heather where he was, in the heart of Slieve Echt, for all the strength had gone from him, with the dint of the long journey he had made. And after a while he took notice that there was a door close to him, and a light coming from it, and he wondered that being so close to him he had not seen it before, and he rose up, and tired as he was, he went in at the door, and although it was night time outside, it was daylight he found within. And presently he met with an old man that had been gathering summer time and yellow flag flowers, and it seemed as if all the sweet smells of the summer were with them. And the old man said, "It is a long time you have been coming to us, Hanrahan the learned man and the great song maker." And with that he brought him into a very big shining house, and every grand thing Hanrahan had ever heard of, and every color he had ever seen, were in it. There was a high place at the end of the house, and on it there was sitting in a high chair a woman, the most beautiful woman world, the most beautiful the world ever saw, having a long pale face and flowers about it, but she had the tired look of one that had been long waiting. And there was sitting on the step below her chair 4 gray old women, and the one of them was holding a great cauldron in her lap, and another a great stone on her knees, and heavy as it was, it seemed light to her, and another of them had a very long spear that was made of pointed wood, and the last of them had a sword that was without a scabbard. Hanrahan stood looking at them for a long time, but none of them spoke any word to him, or looked at him at all, and he had it in his mind to ask who that woman in the chair was, that was like a queen, and what she was waiting for. But ready as he was with his tongue and afraid of no person, he was in dread now to speak to so beautiful a woman, and in so grand a place. And then he thought to ask what were the 4 things the 4 gray old women were holding like great treasures. And he could not think of the right words to bring out. Then the first of the old women rose up, holding the cauldron between her 2 hands, and she said, "Pleasure." And Hanrahan said no word. Then the second old woman rose up with the stone in her hands, and she said, "Power." And the third old woman rose up with the spear in her hand, and she said, "Courage." And the last of the old women rose up, having the sword in her hands, and she said, "Knowledge." And everyone, after she had spoken, waited as if for Hanrahan to question her, but he said nothing at all. And then the 4 old women went out of the door, bringing their 4 treasures with them. And as they went out, one of them said, "He has no wish for us." And another said, "He is weak, he is weak." And another said, "He is afraid." And the last said, "His wits are gone from him." And then they all said, "Echtge, daughter of the silver hand, must stay in her sleep. It is a pity, it is a great pity." And then the woman that was like a queen gave a very sad sigh, and it seemed to Hanrahan as if the sigh had the sound in it of hidden dreams, and if the place he was in had been 10 times grander and more shining than it was, he could not have hindered sleep from coming on him, and he staggered like a drunken man and lay down there. And then, when Hanrahan awoke, the sun was shining on his face, but there was white frost on the grass around him, and there was ice on the edge of the stream he was laying by, and that goes running through the Dare Kill and Drum de Rod. He knew by the shape of the hills and by the shining of Luch Grania in the distance that he was upon one of the hills of Slieve Echtge, but he was not sure how he came there, for all that had happened in the barn had gone from him, and all of his journey, but the soreness of his feet and the stiffness in his bones. It was a year after that. There were men of the village of Capertagle sitting by the fire in the house on the roadside, and Red Hanrahan, that was now very thin and worn, and his hair very long and wild, came to the half door and asked leave to come in and rest himself. And they bade him come welcome, because it was Samhain night. He sat down with them, and they gave him a glass of whiskey out of a quart bottle, and they saw the little inkpot hanging about his neck, and knew he was a scholar, and asked for stories about the Greeks. He took the Virgil out of his big pocket of his coat, but the cover was very black and swollen with the wet, and the page, when he opened it, was very yellow. But that was no great matter, for he looked at it like a young man, like a man that had never learned to read. Some young man that was there began to laugh at him then, and to ask why did he carry so heavy a book with him when he was not able to read it. It vexed Hanrahan to hear that, and he put the Virgil back in his pocket and asked if they had a pack of cards among them, for cards were better than books. When they brought out the cards, he took them and began to shuffle them, and while he was shuffling them, something seemed to come into his mind, and he put his hand to his face like one that is trying to remember, and he said, "Was I ever here before? Or where was I on a night like this?" And then, of a sudden, he stood up and let the cards fall to the floor, and he said, "Who was it brought me a message from Mary Lavelle?" "We never saw you before now, and we never heard of Mary Lavelle," said the man of the house. "And who is she?" he said, "and what is it you're talking about?" "It was this night a year ago. I was in a barn, and there were men playing at cards, and there was money on the table. They were pushing it from one to another here and there, and I got a message, and as I was going out of the door to look for my sweetheart that wanted me, Mary Lavelle, and then Hanrahan called out very loud, 'Where have I been since then? Where was I for the whole year?' It is hard to say where you might have been in that time," said the oldest of the men, "or what part of the world you may have traveled, and it is like enough you have the dust of many roads on your feet. But there are many go wandering and forgetting like that," he said, "when once they have been given the touch." "That is true," said another of the men. "I knew a woman went wandering like that through the length of 7 years. She came back after, and she told her friends she had often been glad enough to eat the food that was put in the pig's trough. And it is best for you to go to the priest now," he said, "and let him take off you whatever may have been put upon you." "It is to my sweetheart I will go, to Mary Lavelle," said Hanrahan. "It is too long I have delayed. How do I know what might have happened to her in the length of a year?" He was going out of the door then, but they all told him it was best for him to stop the night and to get strength for the journey, and indeed he wanted that, for he was very weak, and that when they gave him food, he ate it like a man who had never seen food before, and one of them said, "He is eating as if he had trodden on the hungry grass." It was in the white light of the morning he set out, and the time seemed long to him till he could get to Mary Lavelle's house. But when he came to it, he found the door broken, and the hatch dropping from the roof, and no living person to be seen. And when he asked the neighbor what had happened to her, all they could say was that she had been put out of the house and had married some laboring man, and they had gone looking for work to London or Liverpool or some big place. And whether she found a worse place or a better, he never knew. But anyway, he never met with her or with news of her again. Well, there you go. I don't know if my voice can handle another one. But that's a good one. It's one of my favorites. Here, while I catch my breath, check out this poem I recorded by WB Yeats and made a cool graphic for it. So enjoy an initiatory poem. There's a big debate whether this poem inspired a change in lines for the Stella Matutina ritual or whether it's vice versa. You can decide.
Be you still. Be you still, trembling heart. Remember the wisdom out of the old days. Him who trembles before the flame and the flood and the winds that blow through the starry ways. Let the starry winds and the flame and the flood cover over and hide, for he has no part with the lonely, majestical multitude.
All right, shall we do one more short story? Would that be a good idea? Let's do it. One second. So we're reading from my beautiful old copy from 1913 of Yeats's Red Hanrahan. These are fairy stories from the west of Ireland. The Secret Rose and Rosa Alchemica. Rosa Alchemica I've recorded before on the podcast, but we're going to do one more Halloween fairy story. It's a shorter one, but I had to redo that first one because it's so cool with the 4 magical tools of the 4 provinces of Ireland showing up with the whole mythology around Nua's daughter. It's just amazing. Nuada for some of you. But this one is Hanrahan and Kathleen, the daughter of Houlihan. The names are great, aren't they? Yeah. It was traveling northward. Hanrahan was one time giving a hand to a farmer now, and again in the hurried time of the year, and telling his stories and making his share of songs at wakes and at weddings. He chanced one day to overtake on the road to Collooney one Margaret Rooney, a woman he used to know in Munster when he was a young man. She had no good name at that time, and it was the priest routed her out of the place at last. He knew her by her walk, and by the color of her eyes, and by the way she had of putting back the hair off her face with her left hand. She had been wandering about, she said, selling herrings and the like, and now she was going back to Sligo, to the place in the borough where she was living with another woman, Mary Gillis, who had much the same story as herself. She would be well pleased, she said, if he would come and stop in the house with them, and be singing his songs to the bacchants and blind men and the fiddlers of the borough. She remembered him well, she said, and had a wish for him. And as to Mary Gillis, she had some of his songs off by heart, so he need not be afraid of not getting good treatment, and all the bacchants and poor men that heard him would give him a share of their own earnings for his stories and his songs while he was with them, and he would carry his name into all the parishes of Ireland. He was glad enough to go with her, and to find a woman to be listening to the story of his troubles and to be comforting him. It was at the moment of the fall of day, when every man may pass as handsome and every woman as comely. Excuse me. She put her arm about him when he told her of the misfortune of the twisting of the rope. That's the story we skipped. And in the half light she looked as well as another. They kept in talk all the way to the burrow. And as for Mary Gillis, when she saw him and heard who he was, she went near crying to think of having a man with so great a name in the house. Hanrahan was well pleased to settle down with them for a while, for he was tired with wandering. And since the day he found the little cabin fallen and Mary Lavelle gone from it, and the thatch scattered, he had never asked to have any place of his own, and he had never stopped long enough in any place to see the green leaves come where he had seen the old leaves wither, or to see the wheat harvested where he had seen it sown. It was a good change to him to have a shelter from the wet and a fire in the evening time, and his share of food put on the table without asking. He made a good many of his songs while he was living there, so well cared for and so quiet. The most of them were love songs, but some were songs of repentance, and some were songs about Ireland and her griefs, under one name or another. Every evening the bacchaks and beggars and blind men and fiddlers would gather into the house and listen to his songs and his poems, and his stories about the old time of the Fianna, and they kept in their memories that were never spoiled with books. And so they brought his name to every wake and wedding and pattern in the whole of Connacht. He was never so well off or made so much of as he was at that time. One evening of December he was singing a little song that he said he had heard from the green plover of the mountain, about the fair-haired boys that had left Limerick and that were wandering and going astray in all parts of the world. There were a good many people in the room that night, and 2 or 3 little lads that crept in and sat on the floor near the fire were too busy with the roasting of potatoes in the ashes or some such thing to take much notice of him. But they remembered long afterwards, when his name had gone up, the sound of his voice, and what way he had moved his hand, and the look of him as he sat on the edge of the bed with the shadow falling on the whitewashed wall behind him, and as he moved, going up as high as the thatch. And they knew then that they had looked upon a king of the poets of the Gael, and a maker of the dreams of men. Of a sudden, his singing stopped, and his eyes grew misty, as if he was looking at some far thing. Mary Gillis was pouring whiskey into a mug that stood on the table beside him, and she left off pouring and said, "Is it of leaving us you're thinking?" Margaret Rooney heard what she said, and did not know why she said it, and she took the words too much in earnest, and came over to him, and there was dread in her heart that she was going to lose so wonderful a poet, and so good a comrade, and a man that was thought so much of, and that brought so many to her house. "You would not go away from us, my heart," she said, catching him by the hand. "It is not of that I am thinking," he said, "but of Ireland, and the weight of grief that is on her." And he leaned his head against his hand and began to sing these words, and the sound of his voice was like the wind in a lonely place. The old brown thorn trees break in too high over common strand, under a bitter black wind that blows from the left hand. Our courage breaks like an old tree in a black wind and dies, but we have hidden in our hearts the flame out of the eyes of Kathleen, the daughter of Houlihan. The winds was bundled up the clouds high over Knocknacuria, and thrown the thunder on the stones for all that Maeve can say. Angers that are like noisy clouds have set our hearts a beat, but we have all bent low and kissed the quiet feet of Kathleen, the daughter of Houlihan. The yellow pool has overflowed high upon Clothnabar, for the wet winds are blowing out of the clinging air. Like the heavy flooded waters, our bodies and our blood, but purer than a tall candle before the holy rood, is Kathleen, the daughter of Houlihan. While he was singing, his voice began to break, and tears came rolling down his cheeks, and Margaret Rooney put down her face into her hands and began to cry along with him. Then a blind beggar by the fire shook his rags with a sob, and after that there was no one of them all but cried tears down. That's how it ends. What can we say? Oh, thank you, Jacobus, for the donation. I just realized, it is a song. And, if I was feeling bolder, I might have tried to give it an impromptu melody and sung it for you all. But actually, the reason I couldn't have even bothered is because there's a live stream setting on that prevents singing into the mic, actually, believe it or not. You have to change the setting to be able to sing into a live stream mic. So I was freed from that challenge and it's also nice to hear the words. It really is with Yeats, and especially as he put so much time and energy into copying the dialect of the country people in that particular region, telling the story. So listening for the idioms of expression, and then when he heard a story but it wasn't told, he would go to Lady Gregory and she'd help him understand the idioms of that region that she was from. So that was really fascinating. Yeah. It's good to hang out with a few of you and to put this out into the world. Some, people would probably be surprised to hear these stories they've never heard before, and I think that's pretty cool. Yeah, the other ones are Hanrahan's vision's kind of short. Could maybe do that one. 51. I wish, if you can see how old and beautiful this copy is. Yeah, and I actually got it for 20 quid in London. In 97. Yeah, it's quite a treasure. Probably should have invested more in rare books back then, but then you have to keep them. You have to find somewhere safe to store them, and it's a miracle I still have this one, and I love it so much. Yeah, check out my recording of Rosa Alchemica on the podcast. If it's not good enough, I'll re-record it, but check that out first. It was a long time ago. We'll read the poem, The Secret Rose. But first, we sup. Cheers, Tomas. I'll see you soon, brother. Happy Halloween. Here's a little poem, a very important poem for Yeats, To the Secret Rose. It's short. Far off, most secret and inviolate rose, enfold me in... Let's start that again. To the Secret Rose. Far off, most secret and inviolate rose, enfold me in my hour of hours, where those who sought thee at the holy sepulchre, or in the wine vat, dwell beyond the stir and tumult of deafening dreams, and deep among pale eyelids heavy with the sleep, men have named beauty. Your great leaves enfold the ancient beards, the helms of ruby and gold, of the crowned magi and the king whose eyes saw the pierced hands and rood of elders rise in druid vapor and make the torches dim, till vain frenzy awoke and he died, and him who met fanned, walking among flaming dew, by a gray shore where the wind never blew, and lost the world and Emer for a kiss, and him who drove the gods out of their lists, and till 100 morns had flowered red, feasted and wept the borrows of his dead, and the proud dreaming king who flung the crown and sorrow away, and calling bard and clown, dwelt among wine-stained wanderers in deep woods, and him who sold tillage and house and goods, and sought through lands and islands numberless years, until he found with laughter and with tears a woman of so shining loveliness that men threshed corn at midnight by a tress, a little stolen tress I too await, the hour of thy great wind of love and hate? When shall the stars be blown about the sky, like the sparks blown out of a smithy and die? Surely thine hour has come, thy great wind blows far off, most secret and inviolate rose. And the story that prefaces is one of my favorites, called The Crucifixion of the Outcast, which is wild, but we'll save that for Easter, eh? Yeah, we'll save that. It's a long one, too. It's a very long one. Well, maybe it's not that long. Who knows? The Curse of the Fires and of the Shadows. I mean, the titles with Yeats. I mean, the language is just fantastic. Like, who the fuck writes like this anymore? I mean, what do we got now? Like, Minotaur Milking Farm. Thomas, merci. You know, I don't know, I'm speaking French to you. But cheers. Thomas. Should I do a little one? One last one. Okay, this will be the last one. Kind of wanted to play music on stream tonight, but I have the setup to do it now, finally. Make it sound good, but I've got a long weekend ahead, so yeah, a ritual tomorrow, the next day, and party, secret party. Okay, let's do this. We'll do Hanrahan's Vision. That's only I'll do that. The Hanrahan stories are wild. I mean, and you know, they lure me and lull me. They lull. It's a lure combination of lure and love. Lull. They lure me. They lure and lull me in with their mundaneness, right? Like, it's just people talking in a bar. It's just people saying, hey, let's play cards, let's stay for a drink. Hey, no, you don't have to go see your soon-to-be wife, just stay, right? And you don't expect anything. It's just people making bad decisions. Then he goes, then all of a sudden a bunch of dogs and horses jump out of a deck of cards, and he runs off following them and ends up meeting the gods of Ireland, holding the four symbols of Ireland: the spear, the cauldron, the stone, and the sword. And it fails in the challenge, fails in the test, but and then goes on, and then things they end abruptly. These stories often end abruptly and quite darkly, grimly. So let's see. I think I can pull this one off. Let's do it. Let's do it. Hanrahan's Vision by William Butler Yeats. It was in the month of June. Hanrahan was on the road near Sligo, but he did not go into the town, but turned towards Ben Bulben. For there were thoughts of the old times coming upon him, and he had no mind to meet with common men. And as he walked, he was singing to himself a song that had come to him one time in his dreams. "O death's old bony finger will never find us there, in the high hollow townland where love's to give and to spare, where boughs have no fruit and blossom at all times of the year, where rivers are running over with red beer and brown beer. An old man plays the bagpipes in a gold and silver wood. Queens their eyes blue like the ice are dancing in a crowd. The little fox, he murmured, oh, what of the world's bane? The sun was laughing sweetly, the moon plucked at my rein. But the little red fox murmured, oh, do not pluck at his rein. He is riding to the townland, that is the world's bane. When their hearts are so high that they would come to blows, they unhook their heavy swords from gold and silver bows. But all that are killed in battle awaken to life again. It is lucky that their story is not known among men. For oh, the strong farmers that would let the spade lie, their hearts would be like a cup that somebody had drunk dry. For Michael will unhook his trumpet from a bough overhead, and blow a little noise when the supper has been spread. Gabriel will come from the water with a fish-tail and talk of wonders that have happened on wet roads where men walk, and lift up an old horn of hammered silver and drink till he has fallen asleep upon the starry brink. Hanrahan had begun to climb the mountain then, and he gave over for singing, for it was a long climb for him, and he now and again had to sit down and to rest for a while. And one time he was resting, he took notice of a wild briar bush with blossoms on it that was growing beside a rath, and it brought to mind the wild roses he had used to bring to Mary Lavelle, and to no woman after her, and he tore off a little branch of the bush that had buds on it and open blossoms, and he went on with his song. The little fox, he murmured, "Oh, what of the world's bane? The sun was laughing sweetly, the moon plucked at my rein, but the little red fox murmured, Oh, do not pluck at his rein. He is riding to the townland that is the world's bane." And he went on climbing the hill, and left the rath, and there came to his mind some of that old poems that told of lovers, good and bad, and of some that were awakened from the sleep of the grave itself by the strength of one another's love, and brought away to a life in some shadowy place, where they are waiting for the judgment and banished from the face of God. And at last, at the fall of day, he came to the steep gap of the strangers, and there he laid himself down along a ridge of rock, and looked into the valley, and that was full of gray mist spreading from mountain to mountain. And it seemed to him as he looked that the mist changed to shapes of shadowy men and women, and his heart began to beat with the fear and the joy of the sight, and his hands were always restless, began to pluck off the leaves of the roses of the little branch, and he watched them as they went floating down into the valley in a little fluttering troop. Suddenly he heard a faint music, a music that had more laughter in it and more crying than all the music of this world. And his heart rose when he heard that, and he began to laugh out loud, for he knew that music was made by some who had a beauty and a greatness beyond the people of this world. And it seemed to him that the little soft rose leaves, as they went fluttering down into the valley, began to change their shapes till they looked like a troop of men and women far off in the mist, with the color of the roses on them. And then that color changed to many colors, and what he saw was a long line of tall, beautiful young men and of queen women that were not going from him but coming towards him and past him, and their faces were full of tenderness for all their proud looks, and were very pale and worn, as if they were seeking and ever seeking for high sorrowful things. And shadowy arms were stretched out of the mist as if to take hold of them, but could not touch them, for the quiet that was about them could not be broken. And before them and beyond them, but at a distance as if in reverence, there were other shapes sinking and rising, coming and going, and Red Hanrahan knew them by their whirling flight to be the She, the ancient defeated gods. And the shadowy arms did not rise to take hold of them, for they were of those that can neither sin nor obey. And they all lessened then in the distance, and they seemed to be going towards the white door that is in the side of a mountain. The mist spread out before him, now like a deserted sea, washing the mountains with long gray waves. But while he was looking at it, it began to fill again with a flowering, broken, witless life that was a part of itself, and arms and pale heads covered with tossing hair appeared in the grayness. It rose higher and higher till it was level with the edge of the steep rock, and then the shapes grew to be solid, and a new procession, half lost in mist, passed very slowly with uneven steps, and in the midst of each shadow there was something shining in the starlight. They came nearer and nearer, and Hanrahan saw that they were also lovers, and that they had heart-shaped mirrors instead of hearts, and they were looking and even looking on their own faces in one another's mirrors. They passed on, sinking downward as they passed, and other shapes rose in their place. And these did not keep side by side, but followed one after another, holding out wild, beckoning arms. And he saw that those who were followed were women, and as to their heads, they were beyond all beauty. But as to their bodies, they were but shadows without life, and their long hair moving and trembling about them, as if it lived with some terrible life of its own. And then the mist rose of a sudden and hid them, and then a light gust of wind blew them away towards the northeast and covered Hanrahan at the same time with a white wing of cloud. He stood up trembling, and he was going to turn away from the valley, when he saw two dark and half-hidden forms standing as if in the air, just beyond the rock. And one of them, that had the sorrowful eyes of a beggar, said to him in a woman's voice, "Speak to me, for no one in the world or any other world has spoken to me for 700 years. Tell me, who are those that have passed by?" said Hanrahan. "Those that passed first," the woman said, "are the lovers that had the greatest name in the olden times, Blanad and Deirdre and Grania and their dear comrades, and a great many that are not so well known but are as well loved. And because it was not only the blossom of youth they were looking for in one another, but the beauty that is as lasting as the night and the stars. The night and the stars hold them forever, from the warring and the perishing, in spite of the wars and the bitterness their love brought to the world. And those that came next," she said, "and that still breathe the sweet air and have the mirrors in their hearts, are not put in songs by the poets because they sought only to triumph over one over the other, and so to prove their strength and beauty, and out of this they made a kind of love. And as to the women with shadow bodies, they desired neither to triumph nor to love, but only to be loved. And there is no blood in their hearts or in their bodies until it flows through them from a kiss, and their life is but for a moment. All these are unhappy, but I am the unhappiest of all, for I am Dervadilla, and this is Dermot, and it was our sin brought the Norman into Ireland. And the curses of all the generations are upon us, and none are punished as we are punished. It was but the blossom of the man and of a woman we loved in one another, the dying beauty of the dust, and not the everlasting beauty. When we died, there was no lasting, unbreakable quiet about us, and the bitterness of the battles we brought into Ireland turned to our own punishment. We go wandering together forever, but Dermot, that was my lover, sees me always as a body that has a long time been in the ground, and I know that is the way he sees me. Ask me more, for all the years have left their wisdom in my heart, and no one has ever listened to me for 700 years. A great terror had fallen upon Hanrahan, and lifting his arms above his head, he screamed out loud 3 times. And the cattle in the valley lifted their heads and lowed, and the birds in the wood at the edge of the mountain awakened out of their sleep and fluttered through the trembling leaves. But a little below the edge of the rock, the troop of rose leaves still fluttered in the air, for the gateway of eternity had opened and shut again in one beat of the heart. Well, thank you all for joining me for Tales of Red Hanrahan from the one and only William Butler Yeats, or as we call him, Frater Demonus Deus in Versus. This has been great. Really enjoyed spending a little time in the noosphere with all of you. Thanks for the chats and the support and everything. Jacobus, you're a mensch. And have a happy Halloween. my voice is done, and I have rituals tomorrow and the next day, and then more things to do. So hope you all take it easy. Don't go too hard, and just enjoy the spirit of the season. And I'll end again with my recording of a poem by Yeats. And have a great night.
Be you still. Be you still, trembling heart. Remember the wisdom out of the old days. Him who trembles before the flame and the flood and the winds that blow through the starry ways. Let the starry winds and the flame and the flood cover over and hide, for he has no part with the lonely, majestical multitude. Be you still. Be you still, trembling heart. Remember the wisdom out of the old days. Him who trembles before the flame and the flood, and the winds that blow through the starry ways. Let the starry winds and the flame and the flood cover over and hide, for he has no part with the lonely, majestical multitude.